Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I am the food enthusiast here at J More Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your comments and questions for my guest or myself into the comment section, and you'll see me turn from time to time, check and see, and we'll answer whatever inquiries you might have. Today's guest is a friend, a fellow food enthusiast, former creator of Women's Wine and Dine. She also did Sunday dinner salons. We'll talk about that. And most importantly, she's Alex's mom. A big welcome to Monyka Berrocosa. There she is,
Here I am.
my lobster buddy.
That's right. Your fellow lobster and marzipan addict.
I have a lot to cover with you today, but I think I'm going to start off a little bit differently than I normally do because I've promoted you as Alex's mom. And I think we're going to kick into that right now because in an era now where people are finally saying, let's put some things together about the family, let's put it in a journal. Um, you did something a little bit different, but similar for Alex. So it was his 21st birthday. Fill people in on this.
So it was his 21st birthday, and Alex is a really great kid. He's the type of kid you say, "What do you want for your birthday?" And he doesn't want anything. He doesn't need anything. He's very content. Um, Whereas a lot of kids will want the latest iPhone or a car or whatever. He was really he said, "You know what I really want is I would really like a cookbook." And I thought, "Okay, what cookbook? You want The Joy of Cooking? You want, Mark Bittman, How to Cook Everything? You want Julia Child?" He said, "No, no, no, I want you to write me a cookbook." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I just really love your cooking, and now that I don't live at home, I would love a cookbook of my favorite recipes, your favorite recipes." And I was like, "Wow, you're serious?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, I really want that." So I thought about it, and I realized that to do it to the level that I would want to do it, because I've already written a book, I had to narrow it down. And so I said, "Well, you're turning 21." So I said, "Why don't you pick 21 recipes? Try to go the gamut of, breakfast to desserts, and I'll make it for you." And he said, "Okay." So he narrowed it down, and he got it down to 18. So there was three that I shoved in there. Um, and I just sat down and I wrote it out. And I tried to, with each recipe, explain why I was writing it, why I thought it was important, tried to give him my tips, as a home cook. I mean, I did go to culinary school, but I've never worked in a kitchen professionally. Um, and it was really fun. It was just a lot of work because what I realized, like probably many home cooks, how many recipes do I do without a recipe? How many things do I do,
Right.
whether it's paella, which I learned from my dad, or it's, pancakes, which was the first recipe I ever made in my life. Um, and so, of course, being thorough, I was like, okay, I've got to write the recipe, then I've got to test the recipe, then I've got to test it again just to make sure I did it right. And so here, I thought when I had started this project in January of the year he was turning 21, he turns 21 in August. I thought, okay, this is going to be easy. It'll be done in 2-3 months. And it really took a lot longer than that. So I
It was
prepared
quite
the.
deep. It was
Go
quite
ahead.
detailed.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
you sent me the PDF
yeah.
and you went into like any quality cookbook as to equipment, certain things that you should have within the kitchen, and your recipe not only was like, here's a pancake recipe, blah, 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 but you listed the equipment that he would need
Yeah.
as well. And this is involved. This is, any on the internet, they throw together a recipe, but they really don't think about the process. You thought about every step of the process, bits of advice going on. I like the term that you use. You said it pays to buy with intention.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I think a
Yeah,
lot of people, whether it's a young kid or a newlywed couple or anyone going out on their own, even could be, an empty nester or someone newly divorced who was not the cook and is now cooking. We're just bombarded with so many gadgets and things to buy, and I find as I get older, I am taking things out of my kitchen, things that I don't use. And so I tried to explain, quality over quantity. I'd rather see someone have, one round cake pan, but it's a good quality pan, and a good set of knives, but it doesn't have to be 12. It can be, you're pairing your chef and your
serrated.
serrated or a santuku if you like, um, and all of this I realized took a lot more thought to express in the book. The book's not for sale commercially. I've had people ask me for a copy of it, and I've sent them the PDF, but I really tried to give him something that he would learn from, enjoy, but also be able to refer back to. So
Yeah, and it does range the gamuts. We're friends going back 20 years or more. You like to bake. You can do a baguette tout sweet. And
yeah.
I should tell everybody that Monyka's family was multicultural. She grew up in Montreal. Her father was Spanish. Um, and your what was your family table like? I know that you had two older sisters who they were already out of the house. So what was dinner time like for you?
Well, so my two older sisters are from a previous marriage, and their father was French Canadian. My mother's French Canadian. Um, and the reality is, I mean, I don't know if my mom's going to watch this. I hope not, but she was a terrible cook. She just, everything, I always joke and I say everything she made turned into spaghetti sauce, even if she started with a chicken. There was just
Oh,
something about her. I think she didn't like it. She loved to entertain. She was a great party thrower. She could do a spread of buffet of store-bought fabulous, and have 100 people over, and everybody would be oohing and on because it looked great. But she was not a big cook. And so dinner at home was on repeat. It was literally like Monday night is this and Tuesday night is that. And sometimes it was really gross to me. Um, in Canada, we used to have frozen fish called Captain Highliner, and it would come in a brick. Okay, you can imagine, and it was maybe supposed to be cod or haddock, but it was basically a brick, and by the time it was thawed, it was mealy and gross, and she would make that with like some kind of vegetable I hated, like turnip, like so. Very early on, food interested me, but it wasn't at home that I had the best food.
so memory, which is sporadic for me, comes and goes. Was there not a Vietnamese person who cooked for you at some point?
Yeah, so in the end of the 70s, the Vietnamese boat people, because of the Vietnam War, a bunch of them went, to Canada, and my mother ended up finding a woman in a bus station. I don't even know how this happened. She found a woman in a bus station who had landed in Toronto. She knew her two children had made it to Canada, had no idea where they were. And this woman was just destitute. And my mother said, well, why don't you come live with us? And you can help out. We'll give you a job. You can be kind of like housekeeper,
Right.
nanny, cleaning, whatever. And we'll give you a room, and you don't have to cook, which was a shame. But anyway, everything else. And she was like, you can stay there the time it takes for you to find your children. And this woman, Fung, was Vietnamese, and she stayed with us for like 2.5 years. And what was really interesting was that when we had had our dinner, she would go into the kitchen and she would cook her meals. And her meals smelt good, and they were appetizing, and they had fresh vegetables. And I would just go and peek in the kitchen and like, what are you doing? And she would like have me taste stuff, and thus began my love with spicy food. And next thing you know, she like one day was making pho. She was making pho, as people call it, but pho for those of us who knows. She was making this big batch of soup, and it was hysterical because she was using things my mother never used in the kitchen, big cauldrons that she had and stuff.
Right.
And she showed me how to make it. It took all day to make this broth with bones and stuff. And at first I was grossed out, but little by little, she started taking me to Chinatown. Toronto has one of the best Chinatowns in the world, taking me there when she would go shopping once a week to go buy her Vietnamese things. And then she would take me out to lunch or before, whichever. So it was like Vietnamese food at 9, 10 years of age was my comfort food because you love Vietnamese food, but for anyone who hasn't had it, it's very flavorful, very fresh, very healthy. There is some sugar, but it's not as sweet as some of the other Asian cuisines. And I just, that started I was like, wow, she's making all this. And about the same time, I had decided I was going to learn how to cook. So I grabbed my mother's cookbook, and the first recipe I decided to start making was pancakes. And the reason why I made pancakes was because I would see these commercials of Aunt Jemima on TV coming in from the States, and the families looked so happy and they were having the pancakes. And I thought, well, if I can just make the pancakes, we're going to have these amazing Saturday mornings. So let me learn how to make pancakes, which several tries in the beginning, because you don't follow a recipe when you're a kid. You think you're following, but you're not. So this lady Fung was with us for 2.5 years and eventually found her kids in Saskatchewan, which is another province very far away, and went to them. So she left, and we went back to my mom's food.
Cooking. Cooking.
Yeah.
Whatever. But that time you were cooking a little bit. You were saying about following a recipe. Somebody was interviewing Alton Brown, and he says, what is the most important skill in the kitchen? And he said, learning how to read a recipe. How true that is. And people starting out, they don't mise en place, they don't check to see if they have everything that they need. And it's happened to me. I sit there and I go, I'm going to do this, and I get everything, and I go, I'm missing this one ingredient. And you have to read a recipe. He says twice, I say 3 times, at least 3 times, especially when you're starting out. And it's a new person writing it, it's reading it, understanding it, processing it. Look, haven't you had a recipe, or I've had one, and you read it and they go, they're not making sense.
Oh yeah. Right now I'm about to attempt croissants at some point from scratch, and I've probably read 20 croissant recipes, as well as Nick Maglieri's version, as well as Julia Child's puff pastry. And I'm still, every time I read, believe it or not, I find something, a different tip. Um, and I think for me, that's part of the fun of baking more than cooking. So baking is very precise. Baking is very uh, technique oriented, tool
Right.
oriented, quality of ingredient oriented. You can't just fudge together, a baguette. Like there's certain things that are going to make it better, right? And
It's a
even more so,
science.
yeah, even more so if you get into the puff pastry. So I think that we live in an age where everybody's watching YouTube videos and reels on Instagram, and they're showing you how to do something in 60 seconds on TikTok, if you're lucky, 30 probably. And you can't really learn that way.
Right.
And I think that all accomplished home cooks learn by trial and error, learn by watching more experienced cooks, whether it's on TV or at a demonstration or whatever, or asking their mother or whoever is going to
Right.
show them something. And I think that today we're so rushed that people are overwhelmed by cooking. They're like, oh, let me get a factor, in a box and stick it in my special oven. And I don't blame them, but I think if people learn the basics, they would be amazed at how many things it can make and how much cheaper it is and how much healthier it is and how rewarding it can be after a really stressful day to putter in the kitchen.
Right. There was an article in the New York Times years and years ago called The Zen of Cooking, and that process of chopping and cutting.
Hmm.
You're focused because you have a knife in your hand
Mm-hmm.
and your mind is there. It's not elsewhere. It can't be, not when you're cutting food. So it sort of detoxes you from your day. Um, so Canada, then Paris,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
then
I moved to France when I was 20. I moved there to pursue modeling. I had been doing modeling part time since I was 14, and I had an opportunity, and so to give people an idea, I weighed at the time probably 70 pounds less than I do now. And they thought I was overweight when I got there. And they told me, you can't gain more than, I think it was 2 kilos or a kilo, something crazy. And in a month, I gained like 10 pounds because I ate everything in sight. And so
croissants. Yeah, and these
croissants, just everything. It was so good. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, maybe now it's easier, but back then you had to really struggle to find bad food. I mean, pretty much a sandwich was delicious, a crepe on the street, like it's all good. And so I ended up helping someone open a sandwich shop of all things. And that led to like 2 years working in restaurants, bouncing around Europe, but being based in Paris. And then came back to Canada, decided to get a real, education, went to McGill, met my ex-husband, like to say I got a marriage and a degree. Um, and then he was French. So we went back to France for a while. And then we ended up in the States for a lot of complicated reasons. He was, finishing up his postdoc, and we ended up in Delaware of all places, which if you've ever been to Delaware, no offense, leaving Paris to go to Delaware, I mean, just the food scene doesn't exist. Um,
right.
you know, I
Well,
remember
that's
we
where you
asked,
went. Is that
go
that where
ahead.
you went to culinary school?
Yeah,
Didn't you
I
take
went to culinary school at Delaware Tech, and I did a culinary certificate because I was home and I had time. And back then, the Food Network had just started, and I would watch it all day long. And like, it was so funny. My husband would come in from the research lab at like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, I'm making duck fat French fries because I saw that on Emerald today. Like, every day was a different experience. Um, but yeah, I got into wine in Delaware because I ended up meeting a woman who had a really fabulous wine shop. And when she found out I could speak several languages, she was like, would you come in one day a week and just translate for me? Because she's like, the winemakers come in and I never know if they're talking about me. I don't really know what they're saying to each other. So I said, sure. So that started out one afternoon a week. And I remember telling her, I can't do more than that because I have to cook for my husband. And that turned into 4 days a week. ended up turning into teaching wine classes and led me down.
Women's wine and dine you did for a number of years.
Yeah, I started that in 2004, which we're really dating ourselves now, aren't we, Dara? When we go back like almost a quarter century. Yeah, I started that because I'd been teaching wine classes, been noting more and more women were coming to them and were curious. And back then, I mean, people, you say this today and they're like shocked. It was the man who ordered the wine, and women, maybe liked a Riesling or a bubble, and that was it. They didn't know anything about wine and they wanted to learn. And so, yeah, I started the Women's Wine and Dine. That went for 18 years. I mean, I did one in October of last year because people asked me to do one, but it grew to like 4 states, tons of people, huge events. But I think I've always been interested in the concept of what are you curious about? Let's learn about it together, whether it's wine, whether it's food, whether it's art, whatever. I really enjoy gathering people in a situation where they can have a conversation.
Well, that
And
come yeah, that comes to what I was talking about, which was your Sunday dinner salons. And
yeah, I
I
mean, you were a
great
regular.
I was a regular. Well, food, good conversation. It's
Yeah.
important futzing around in the kitchen, your kitchen too,
Yeah.
so we had fun, but it was based on you're a great lover of art. So I think that sort of started it. But I
Hmm.
remember um, just different people that you had met in having some artists there, but it was really multicultural as to the people who were there. What was the olive oil guy?
Oh, yeah. um the olive oil oh, so yeah, so that was a friend who worked at Pompeian Olive Oil, who would bring like a case of olive oil for everybody, and everybody would get to try a different olive oil. And yeah, it started from the fact that I had a pretty good art collection, and a lot of the artists were local. So I thought, well, let's just throw one up on a white wall and invite people and have a dinner and have a theme. I love a theme. And everybody can bring a covered dish if they want or not. And the artist can talk about what their work means to them and that piece if they so choose. And it would be on Sunday because I feel I've always loved this idea of the Sunday dinner, and so many people I find are lonely, on Sunday. They're not in a couple, or even if they're in a couple, they're kind of sitting there looking at each other. Um, so it was kind of fun to get this merry-go-round of people because I would change purposefully. It wasn't always the same people. Some people had an open seat, like you could come anytime, but other people were invite only. And it was a lot of fun. I had the space. I had a big kitchen, so people would be in my kitchen and talking to me while I was cooking, and some in the living room, some in the dining area. Like, I loved it. And Alex grew up with that. My son, he would reluctantly be asked to come upstairs from playing Xbox to say hello to everyone, but he would grab a plate of food and go back down, and it was a memory for him. I thought for a while those things annoyed him, but recently he talked to me about it. And he was like, I think I love food and I love people because of that, because of those times together.
That
So.
that table, whether family table or I'll say it that way, that table, bringing people together around the table, sharing.
Mhm.
Well, to me, if I'm going to give it a relation, food is love.
Mhm.
That's it. Because that's what I felt when I sat at the family table.
Mhm.
My mother was, you all sit down, you eat dinner, we talk about our day. There's no newspaper, there's no TV, and obviously there were no cell phones at that time.
Yeah.
So, that unity. And I once did an interview at one of the Women Chef and Restaurateurs conferences. I went around with my little flip thing and I said, why food? And most of them, in one way or another, said food brings people together. And it does.
Yeah, and it's a great equalizer. We all eat, whether we have dietary restrictions or not, or we're a good cook or not, we all eat. We all enjoy a good meal, most of us anyway. And I think that it's the kind of thing where you can sit and you saw this at the dinner parties. You could sit a CEO next to a librarian, and they in the outer world would have nothing in common, would never come together, would never cross paths. But all of a sudden, both of them are oohing and eyeing over tapenade. They love tapenade, whether they've had it before or not. Then this big conversation starts, and between two people who otherwise might be struggling to find something to talk about, food has a way of just bringing it all down to a really elemental level. And and it's funny, I find food is one of those things where you can have different opinions and nobody gets offended. It's not like politics. It's like, well, I don't like eggs or I can't eat eggs. Okay, well, you can't. I love eggs, and nobody gets upset. But I find so many things more and more in the world, you have a differing opinion and no, you're mortal enemies now.
Well, food brings people together, as you say. And there are many people that I met at your table that I remain friends with who I probably would have never met before, like Michael Brule, who's an artist, or um, the makeup artist, Owen, just people, some acquaintances, but still, it was a nice connection. I want to tell people that, you know, back when I knew you and met you, you had written a book and you can find it, everyone. It's called One Zip at a Time. It's Musings on Wine, Women, and Wisdom by Monyka Berrocosa. Monyka has a website, monikaberrocosa.com, and she actually spelt her name correctly, which I didn't do the other day. And I went, oh, I put an A in there. And then I found another one. So that's what happens when you edit your own stuff. So, check her out. And on Instagram, she does so much cooking. I'm going to get to that in a moment. It's My City M.
Yeah.
My City M on Instagram. Follow her. I just want to go over, I'm losing this here, a couple things that she cooked just recently. What was it? Yesterday was the roasted chicken with light gravy, crispy potatoes, and roasted veggies. Then before that was this seared swordfish with lemon, butter, and capers, and a garlicky Tuscan kale. Valentine's Day, she just sort of a starter, some olives, cheese, shrimp cocktail. Then she made crab cakes, asparagus, and smoked salt crusted baked potatoes. Then she did a pavlova for dessert, which was heart-shaped, filled with a custard, chocolate ganache, raspberries, and whipped cream. Just a little. You don't want to miss what she's putting up there. And then she's always baking bread, which is always a challenge for me. We come to the last couple questions that I always ask. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Travel more, go far, leave your comfort zone. Um, I did it at 20. I wish I would have done it at 18. Because you're never going to have that low level of responsibility in your life. So I would say travel, and travel by the fork, eat as many different things as you can, try as many things as you can. But the main thing would be, travel, get out there, experience.
All righty. Two things that are a must in your refrigerator.
Ooh. So, I mean, beyond the obvious of butter and milk, and eggs, miso. I love miso, miso paste, whether it's red miso, white miso, brown miso, any kind of miso. For those who don't know it, it's Japanese fermented soybean paste, and it just brings a level of flavor to things, whether it's a soup or you can make a really nice paste and do like a easy crust on a piece of fish. You can even add it to caramel if you're adventuresome. So miso, and then I would say lemons.
Okay.
Lemons.
So you're covering sort of those sweet, sour things. You're covering the tongue with what you have. Okay. Best bites you've had all week.
Best bite I've had all week. Oh, well, that's easy. We went on Monday. My son took us to a Mexican restaurant in Laurel called Los Primos, and there's a few of them in Maryland. And I had their ceviche on homemade tortilla chips, and it was delicious. It was just so good, crunchy, salty, a little bit of sweet from the red onions, the cilantro. Yeah, really good bite.
Okay. If you wake up tomorrow morning with a new talent, what would the new talent be?
Does it have to be culinary?
No, it can be what
Oh, if I
everybody's.
everybody's different. I think if I could, I would probably paint, be an artist. I don't really think I'm a good painter. I know people say there's no such thing as a good painter, it's all in the eye of the beholder, but to have that talent, to know more about it, that would be good.
Remember that zip and paint class that we did?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where I went totally off script. I went abstract. The woman was a little perturbed.
That was fun. And um, what haven't I asked you that I probably should ask you that you want people to know about you or about food or about family? Your last little piece of advice to everyone,
Oh, advice. Oh, that
or
totally changed.
whatever,
It changed my answer. So I think just because we're friends, um, I wish you would have asked me what my favorite thing is that you make. And what I would tell people is Dara, for all her saying she's a frustrated baker, she's a very good baker. And she makes a torta de Santiago, which is an almond based traditional Spanish cake that is to die for. It's just so good.
Well, thank you, everybody. Monyka Berrocosa. You can see the spelling under her name because I might spell it out for you, but you're not going to get it. So it's MonykaBerrocosa.com. And on Instagram, you definitely want to give her a follow. It's My City M, like in Mary or in Monica. We'll go with that. Monyka, the best. I'm going to see you Saturday. We'll talk about those details later offline
Okay.
because we don't want people to know where we're going to be.
No, no, and they're gonna wish they were where we're gonna be. So
Right, right.
thank you so much for having me on.
It's
Thank you
been a
for all the
pleasure.
fun around food on and off the air.
Thank you. And everybody, I'm just going to catch you up on a couple of things. You can feel free to reach out to me via my email, food@jmoreliving.com. My Instagram is @DaraCooks. And on Facebook, I do have a page called The Food Enthusiast. Next week's guest is Dominic Knight, aka Dom in the Kitchen, who cooks food, writes recipes, creates reels, and has grown his Instagram to 750,000 followers. I've been following Dom online for a while, and he has taken his upside down cooking to the next level. His cookbook, Upside Down Cooking, is available to pre-order now. The show will be coming live from the English countryside of Lancashire. So tune in next Thursday. And if you want to check him out, at DOM in the kitchen. Check him out on Instagram. You can sign up for jmoreliving.com's free food email newsletter that goes out every Tuesday by going to jmoreliving.com, and on the top of the menu it says contact. Click on that and you can see where you can sign up for the free e-newsletter that is all about food, recipes, the show, what's going on in food here in Baltimore. All shows are immediately archived in video form on Jamore Living's Facebook page and jamoreliving.com. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. Feel free to go back into our archives and enjoy past shows. As I always say, may your plates always, always remain full. I hope to see you here next Thursday.